A Mortal's Journey to Immortality Episode 334. In the previous episode, Han Li continued to conceal his true strength while traveling with the Grey Heron tribe. Quietly observing as a mysterious soaring tribe's cultivator repeatedly searched the skies above. As the two small tribes joined forces on their journey, tensions eased until a sudden, chilling shriek shattered the calm. 3 vicious simian vultures descended, their terrifying cries throwing the mortals into chaos. An inexperienced young cultivator, Immortal Feng, rushed out to fight, only to be quickly overwhelmed. Han Li watched silently, realizing the battle would soon turn deadly. At the end of the previous episode, Immortal Feng's attack failed, and 2 demon birds closed in from above, their claws reaching for his head as panic swept across the escort. And the story continues. The blue-robed cultivator turned pale with fright and hastily commanded his flying magic tool to shoot back in order to avoid the 2 simian vultures' attacks. He had clearly underestimated them. As grade 2 demon beasts, the vultures were bound to possess some ability. The young man's retreat was frantic and uneven, and although he managed to pull himself back through the air, the shrieks that erupted from the descending vultures struck him like a hammer. His vision trembled, his mind reeled, and for a moment he nearly fell from the sky altogether. A foul wind swept down upon him, carrying the fishy stench of the creatures, and his face turned completely white as terror flooded every part of him. Then, 2 muffled explosions rang out. Fist-sized fireballs rose upward and smashed directly into the oncoming beasts. A wave of red light burst outward, wrapping the vultures in roiling flames. The sudden surge of heat distorted the air itself. The creature's shrill howls abruptly stopped, swallowed by the blaze. The blue-robed cultivator gasped for breath, overwhelmed with relief, knowing he had barely escaped death. He recalled his flying tool at once and darted backward several dozen meters. With trembling hands, he pulled out a talisman and slapped it onto his chest. A thin yellow barrier formed around him, and only then did he begin to feel a fragile sense of security returning. It dawned on him how vast the difference was between practicing spells in peace and facing real danger. His lack of practical experience had almost cost him his life. As this sobering thought settled in, he looked downward, and saw Han Li standing calmly beneath him. Wearing an identical azure cloak, the blue-robed cultivator understood instantly that the fireballs had come from him. Yet the danger was far from over. The 2 simian vultures burst free from the flames, their bodies charred and grotesque. Ignoring the blue-robed cultivator entirely, they turned their burning eyes toward Han Li, the injured vulture whose claw had been severed earlier. However, lunged again toward the blue-robed man, driven mad by pain. Han Li frowned slightly as he assessed the situation, then flicked one of the pouches at his waist. 2 streaks of white light shot forth, revealing a pair of half-foot-long snow-white centipedes. Though small compared to the massive vultures, the insects radiated a cold, ancient presence. As soon as they appeared, they gave off an excited buzz, completely unafraid. The vultures, on the other hand, reacted with shock, their ape-like heads twisted in panic, wings beating violently as they tried to halt their charge. After catching the insect's scent, they attempted to turn and flee outright. For lower-grade demon beasts, the aura of ancient exotic insects was a terror they dared not face. But the centipedes had no intention of letting them escape. With a shrill cry, they spat out streams of pale, glacial energy that shot forward with astonishing speed. The icy surge consumed the vultures, cutting off their screams. Without hesitation, the 2 insects rushed straight into the freezing mist after their prey. Seeing that this battle required no further attention, Han Li turned his gaze toward the blue-robed cultivator. The young man was barely managing to control his small sword while drenched in sweat. The injured vulture circling him moved like a blur of brown light, darting around him with maddening speed. Each time it passed, its single remaining claw struck the yellow barrier with ruthless force. The repeated blows shook the blue-robed cultivator's concentration, making it nearly impossible for him to direct his sword properly. Although his sword was strong, he himself was inexperienced. He had only managed to injure the vulture earlier because it had not expected such a strike. Now, he could barely keep it in sight. His other talismans were beyond his ability to use while dividing his focus. Managing the sword alone already pushed him to his limit. If things continued this way, he would soon be overwhelmed. Han Li watched with a cold glint in his eyes. Just as he considered intervening, the vulture abruptly screeched and broke away from its assault. Its wings unfurled and it shot off into the distance as if sensing something unseen. Both Han Li and the blue-robed cultivator were surprised. But Han Li only snorted softly. With a casual flick of his hand, a thin red thread flashed through the air. The fleeing vulture froze mid-flight, then plummeted straight into the ground. It did not move again. Han Li knew well the vicious grudges that simian vultures were capable of holding. He had no intention of letting a surviving beast cause him trouble later. Eliminating it now was the simplest solution. The blue-robed cultivator stared in disbelief, then blurted out, "A flying needle. You use flying needle magic tools?" Han Li cast him a calm glance. "What, is there anything strange about that?" He summoned the needle back with a wave of his hand. It was a small inch-long sliver of silver light, gleaming faintly with red. The young man seemed ready to respond. But before he could speak, two heavy crashes echoed nearby. Two white blocks of ice dropped from the sky, smashing deep craters into the earth. Trapped inside the crystalline frost were the remaining vultures, their eyes frozen wide open. A flash of white light cut through the blocks, and the two centipedes emerged, circling Han Li before settling comfortably on his shoulder. Swallowing hard, the blue-robed cultivator asked, "Your esteemed self cultivates spirit insects?" Han Li calmly stroked one of the centipedes. "That's right, I nurtured these two glacial snow centipedes myself." The young man's eyes lit up with awe and greed. Would fellow Taoist be willing to part with the flying needle and the spirit insects? "I will purchase them at a great cost." Han Li was momentarily taken aback, then let out a soft, amused breath. "Is fellow Taoist joking? These insects have already recognized me as their master, and the price of the needle might be beyond you. Spirit stones are no matter. You may name any price," the blue-robed cultivator declared boldly. Driven by the sight of the needle's lethal efficiency, Han Li narrowed his eyes, studying him for a long moment. At last he said coolly, "Apologies, but this needle is extremely useful to me. For now, I cannot sell it." The blue-robed cultivator let out a disappointed sigh. "Very well, if I possessed such a sharp tool, I would be reluctant to sell it too." After a moment of hesitation, he steadied his tone. "My name is Feng Yue, and I have not properly thanked you for saving my life. Might I know your esteemed name?" "My surname is Han," Han Li said simply. "For now, let us settle things here first." Only then did Feng Yue notice that the mortals had emerged from hiding. They stood respectfully at a distance, eyes filled with awe. The tribal leaders stood closer, excitement evident on their faces. Especially Ying Lu, who had witnessed the three deadly vultures slain almost effortlessly by the immortal he had hired. Relief and admiration washed over him. Han Li called the leaders forward. "Handle the demon beasts. Bring me their claws and tail feathers. The rest can be used as you see fit." Both leaders agreed eagerly. To mortals, the flesh of a simian vulture was a valuable resource, even if it meant little to cultivators. Their tribesmen immediately began working, though the frozen carcasses required some effort to break apart. Han Li then turned back to Feng Yue. "If immortal Feng is unharmed, you should return to your carriage and rest. I am somewhat tired and will be heading back myself." With those indifferent words, he walked away without waiting for a reply. Feng Yue stood awkwardly, unsure how to react. He had hoped to befriend Han Li after witnessing his strength, but Han Li's cold tone left him unable to pursue the conversation. Bound by gratitude and outmatched in power, he could only sigh and quietly return to his carriage. Han Li, already seated cross-legged inside his own carriage, watched Feng Yue depart with unreadable calm. Then, a familiar voice echoed softly in his mind. "Master, that person has quite a bit of backing. Why has Master separated himself from him?" Silvermoon's baffled voice appeared in his mind. After resting for a time, Silvermoon had finally recovered enough strength to speak without effort. "That person isn't from the soaring tribes." "What? How does Master know this?" Han Li's sudden statement came as a shock to Silvermoon. Han Li did not answer immediately. Instead, he slowly opened his hand, revealing a small swirl of blue radiance. Within that glow, the image of a jade pendant appeared, engraved with ancient characters. Silvermoon's voice trembled slightly as she recognized them. These were ancient characters used by the Great Jin Empire, the mighty cultivation nation far beyond the endless sky plains. Han Li calmly explained that the blue-robed cultivator, Feng Yue, carried this pendant under his robe, hidden at his waist. Although he had tried to conceal it, Han Li's bright-sight spirit eyes had penetrated the thin layer of cloth with ease. That jade pendant, he said, was not simply an ornament. It was a top-grade protective magic tool. Every time a demon bird drew too close, it released a soft wave of protective spiritual force, shielding its owner from immediate danger. Feng Yue's life had never been at serious risk, even before Han Li intervened during the earlier battle. Silvermoon grew contemplative as she examined the floating image. She recalled records from ancient texts, speaking of a noble clan that carried the grand surname Feng, though written differently from the common version. This clan, she said, was spread widely across various territories of the Great Jin, the state of Ning, the West Ning province, and many places bearing similar names. To her, Feng Yue's identity was now quite obvious. Han Li agreed, regardless of which branch of the Great Jin's noble clans the man belonged to. His presence on the endless sky plains meant complications. Everyone carrying a powerful protective treasure had a story behind them, and Han Li had no wish to be dragged into it. His priority was to leave the plains, avoid unnecessary attention, and find a way to dissolve the baleful spiritual corruption still lingering inside his body. With that, he closed his eyes, ending the discussion. Silvermoon chuckled softly, then fell silent. She understood his reasoning. A noble disciple from the Great Jin did not travel disguised amongst small tribes without reason. Where he walked, trouble was sure to follow. Meanwhile, the tribes labored to break apart the huge blocks of ice that imprisoned the slain simian vultures. Using heavy hammers, they cracked open the frozen shells until they could butcher the beasts properly. Following the customs of the plains, they delivered the claws and tail feathers to Han Li, the rightful slayer, while the remaining materials were divided between the Grey Heron tribe and the Red Wolf tribe. Although the Grey Heron tribe received the largest share because Han Li had acted on their behalf, tribe leader Ba of the Red Wolf tribe still felt satisfied. Their own immortal had done nothing during the attack, yet they had still gained valuable materials from beasts that normally would have been impossible for them to defeat. Inside a sealed carriage of the Red Wolf tribe, Feng Yue finally removed his cloak. Without it, his pale but handsome face appeared clearly, defined by sharp eyes and thin lips. His expression turned cold as he searched around his neck until his fingers brushed against a golden chain. Hanging from it was a long silver key engraved with strange symbols and a golden character marking his clan name. He stared at it with a complicated expression that flickered between longing, sorrow, and bitterness. Before finally sagging into gloom, he tucked it back under his robes and closed his eyes, circulating spiritual power to recover from his earlier exertion. Once the vultures were fully cleaned, the two tribes resumed traveling. Their earlier chatter and casual attitudes vanished. The youths, especially those with spiritual veins, were filled with trembling excitement. Soon they would reach the legendary temple. Soon they might receive guidance from true immortals and change their fates forever. The following day passed quietly as the caravan advanced. Han Li, immersed in his comprehension of the incantation to dissolve the pestilence demon's soul lock seal, kept his spiritual sense suppressed. But eventually, he detected faint ripples of spiritual force ahead, the sign of a large encampment belonging to the Endless Sky Temple. The encampment housed many low-grade cultivators, though Han Li sensed no powerful ones nearby. Still, caution compelled him to remain vigilant. Two tribes cheered loudly when the temple encampment came into view. Han Li lifted the curtain of his carriage. In the distance stood a tall black mass, which, under the enhancing glow of his bright-sight spirit eyes, resolved into a 12-meter-tall wooden and stone wall. Behind it lay rows of large tents, wooden houses, and the movement of many soaring tribes mortals. At the center stood a large hall carved from a single monolithic stone. With a few smaller stone buildings scattered nearby, Han Li spotted several cultivators entering and leaving the hall, confirming its importance. What caught his attention next were the towering stone pillars arranged along the perimeter. They pulsed with bright light and stood over 100 meters tall, each as thick as the width of a man's arms. They formed a vast protective formation that sealed the air, preventing flight within the encampment. 2 hours later, the tribes entered the encampment without obstruction. Chaos greeted them. Mismatched tents, crude wooden structures, and cramped pathways. Only the main streets were somewhat orderly. These temporary shelters belonged to small, distant tribes who were required to offer their tributes here, unlike the wealthier clans living near the temple itself. The Gray Heron tribe found an empty spot in a remote corner and began pitching their tents. Han Li watched quietly until tribe leader Ying Lu approached him with respectful caution. He said the encampment was too disorderly for a great immortal to rest comfortably. There was a special area for cultivators to stay, and he invited Han Li to settle there until they departed in 2 days. Han Li agreed with a simple nod and headed toward the large 2-story stone hall. 2 enormous sculptures of flood dragons with bullheads guarded the entrance. Although he appeared calm, he felt uneasy being surrounded by so many cultivators. If a nascent soul cultivator happened to be nearby, his disguise might be seen through. It would be safer to settle outside the encampment and return only when the Gray Heron tribe was ready to depart. With that decision made, he left the encampment and flew tens of kilometers away on a small sword. Spotting a field of scattered boulders, he descended on a towering stone and examined the surroundings with his spiritual sense. Finding no one nearby, he sliced open the boulder with a wave of azure sword energy, carving out a 6-meter-wide space to serve as a temporary cave. Then he placed formation flags around the stone, creating an invisibility spell formation that erased the entire boulder from sight. Satisfied, Han Li entered the concealed cave and began meditating. Time passed quickly. By the next day, he had made excellent progress on the incantation Monarch Soul Divergence had left behind. It went far smoother than he had expected, and he was nearing the final stages of comprehension. But as he pondered a particularly complicated segment of the technique, his brow twitched. A ripple of awareness shuddered through his mind, pulling him abruptly out of meditation. He opened his eyes with a flabbergasted expression. Silvermoon did not raise any objections to his words. Then, Han Li closed his eyes and continued to sit in silence. A while later, Han Li let out a yelp and shock appeared on his face. This time, Silvermoon tactfully remained silent as Han Li tightly frowned before having sudden changes of expression. Inside the stillness of the stone cave, Han Li's breathing grew unstable as he sensed something deeply disturbing within his body. His mind stirred, and he urgently reached out to Monarch Soul Divergence. He asked whether the older spirit had truly said that most known methods of dissolving baleful spiritual force originated from Buddhist sects. Monarch Soul Divergence lazily confirmed it. Though Confucian and Taoist lineages possessed their own methods, none matched the sheer effectiveness of Buddhist techniques in purging malignant forces. Han Li pressed further, asking if Buddhist techniques were commonly recognized by the presence of a shimmering 7-colored radiance when activated. Monarch Soul Divergence affirmed this once more and asked if Han Li had noticed something important. Instead of answering, Han Li lowered his voice, muttering that if that were true, then someone he had encountered earlier might be valuable after all. Perhaps there was an opportunity hidden within the situation he had previously dismissed. Before Monarch Soul Divergence could probe further, Han Li abruptly rose to his feet. With an expression of resolve cutting through his earlier uncertainty, he summoned a magic tool, transformed into an azure streak of light, and shot out of the cave at remarkable speed. Silvermoon and Monarch Soul Divergence were both startled, but neither interrupted him. They merely observed in silence, sensing that whatever conclusion Han Li had reached was significant enough to move him instantly. His flight carried him across several dozen kilometers until he reached a place rarely seen in the endless sky plains, a small, scattered forest stretching across half a kilometer. The trees here were short and sparse, but in the center lay a clearing roughly 30 meters wide. It was the same location where he had last sensed the two unfamiliar cultivators. The first thing he saw was the blue-robed cultivator lying face down on the ground. His body was completely motionless, and a dark bloodstain spread across his back. It was uncertain whether he was still alive. However, wrapped around him was a shimmering seven-colored light barrier, flickering and trembling without stability, clearly operating without its master's control. Standing beside the barrier was a second figure, an elderly man in purple robes. His sharp, eagle-like eyes filled with cold intent. He repeatedly struck at the seven-colored barrier with a fire-red flying sword, attempting to break through it before the blue-robed cultivator's treasure faded. Han Li approached openly, not bothering to conceal his presence. The purple-robed old man immediately sensed him and cast out his spiritual sense. Realizing that Han Li appeared to be no more than a Foundation establishment cultivator, he relaxed. His killing intent flared, and with one decisive motion of his hand, he unleashed a streak of black light toward Han Li. It was a tri-pointed metal stake wrapped in malign black energy, flying so quickly it nearly blurred. Han Li responded with a soft, cold snort. A black-green cloud surged from the top of his head, expanding into a massive spectral hand over a meter long. It intercepted the projectile effortlessly. The purple-robed cultivator froze in disbelief as the connection between himself and the tri-pointed stake was severed instantly. Before he could recover from the shock, the enormous hand vanished, then reappeared overhead in the form of a massive fist descending with brutal force. He let out a single, horrified scream before being crushed into a mound of blood and bone. The spectral fist unfolded once more into a hand, plucking from the remains a small ball of green light. It then flew back toward Han Li and transformed into his second nascent soul, which perched happily upon his shoulder. The little figure smiled broadly, holding the tri-pointed stake in one hand and the captured green light in the other. Han Li could not help but feel stirred. During his earlier confrontation with the soaring tribes, he had refrained from using this second nascent soul, preserving it for only the most dangerous situation. Yet now, witnessing how easily it had slain a core formation cultivator with a single transformation, he realized its strength exceeded even his earlier expectations. Pushing aside the thought, he descended to ground level and approached the trembling seven-colored barrier. The abandoned red flying sword rested weakly on the dirt, but Han Li did not spare it a glance. Instead, he examined the luminous barrier closely. At its center floated a blue jade pendant, radiating the shifting colors of a rainbow. Strange Buddhist characters shimmered in and out of the light. It was the same pendant he had shown Silvermoon earlier, engraved with the words, Feng of Ning. He asked Monarch Soul Divergence whether this pendant had been refined by a Buddhist monk. Monarch Soul Divergence scoffed, stating that the materials and craftsmanship were unmistakably Buddhist in origin, and not from an ordinary one. A high-grade Buddhist cultivator must have refined it, given that it had withstood continuous attacks from a core formation magic treasure. Hearing this, Han Li felt a surge of quiet satisfaction. His intuition had been correct. He pressed his hand against the barrier and summoned a thin layer of celestial ice flames. Though his current cultivation allowed him to manipulate only a small portion of the heavenly flames, it was more than enough. The seven-colored barrier shuddered violently, cracked, and then shattered completely. Stepping through the fading light, Han Li knelt beside the blue-robed cultivator. The man's aura was faint, unstable, and marked by the unmistakable stench of death. His life was fading by the moment. Without delay, Han Li formed a magical seal and breathed out a cloud of azure spiritual energy to stabilize the body. With a wave of his sleeve, he flipped the youth onto his back. A chill ran through him. Feng Yue's complexion had turned pitch black, his lips stained a sickly purple. It was a grotesque and unmistakable sign of severe poisoning. Quickly, Han Li examined his body with spiritual sense, followed by a close inspection using the bright azure glow of his eyes. The poison had invaded every part of Feng Yue's meridians and organs. By all reasonable judgment, the youth should already have been dead. Something was unnaturally preserving him. Han Li searched for the source and soon found it. Tearing open part of Feng Yue's robe, he uncovered a silver chain holding a silver key that pulsed faint white light. That key was continuously dispersing the poison gathered at the center of Feng Yue's chest. Even so, the skin there had turned entirely black. Han Li's gaze hardened. He gripped Feng Yue's arm and sent a rush of azure spiritual energy into the body. At first it pushed back some of the poison. But then, alarmingly, the azure energy began turning black. The poison flooded against it like a tide and raced back up toward Han Li's hand. Recognizing the danger, Han Li shouted, "Agony poison!" His expression paled. He instantly severed the connection between their spiritual energies before the corruption could spread into his own meridians. Monarch Soul Divergence chuckled with dark amusement, announcing that Han Li had just encountered one of the 10 absolute poisons. There was no saving Feng Yue now. It would be pointless to spend further effort. Han Li shot him an annoyed glare. Even if he could not fully purge the poison, he insisted he could still awaken Feng Yue and keep him alive for roughly 10 days using sufficient medicinal resources. Whether that effort was worthwhile, however, remained uncertain. Silvermoon gently reminded him that awakening the youth first would allow him to clarify his relationship with the Buddhist sects of the Great Jin. Only after knowing the truth should Han Li decide how far he wished to intervene. Han Li nodded slightly. "That is true. Until I know about his relationship to the Buddhist sects of the Great Jin, I am unwilling to take any further actions." Soon after, Han Li slapped his storage pouch and produced a small white bottle into his hand. Han Li flipped the small bottle and dropped a fire-red, almond-sized medicine pill into his hand. A trace of sorrow appeared on his face. This was a medicine pill refined from a high-grade demon core, usually reserved to raise the spiritual power of core formation cultivators. Using something so valuable on a foundation establishment cultivator felt painfully wasteful. But he no longer had any better options. If his own magic power had not been sealed, and if Silvermoon had not been injured, he could have used a soul-searching technique and avoided this entire ordeal. He held Feng Yue's chin in one hand and forced his mouth open. With his other hand, he wrapped the pill in a thin stream of azure spiritual energy and flicked it into Feng Yue's throat. When he released him, Han Li retrieved a sparkling silver needle from his waist. A cold glint ran along its surface as he stabbed Feng Yue's body in a rapid blur of motion. Each point that the needle touched immediately spurted black, foul-smelling blood, as if the poison could not wait to escape. Han Li stepped back, clasped his hands behind him, and waited in silence. The time it took to drink a cup of tea passed. A thick pool of black poisonous blood collected around Feng Yue. Finally, the youth began to groan faintly, as though drifting up from a deep abyss. Han Li flicked his fingers and sent a ripple of wind that halted the remaining poisonous blood from flowing. His shoulder trembled, and his second nascent soul quietly left his body, turning into a black cloud that vanished into the trees. Feng Yue's eyes slowly opened, and when he recognized Han Li standing before him, he let out a startled cry and struggled to sit up. Han Li gave him an indifferent look and asked, "What, is it surprising to see me?" Feng Yue's voice was weak but tense. "Was it you who saved me? Where is that traitor Feng Zhen?" Without a hint of concern, Han Li nodded toward the side. "You mean the purple-robed man? He is dead." Feng Yue forced himself to look over and soon spotted the mangled remains. Shock, resentment, and disbelief crossed his face before he returned his gaze to Han Li, now with wariness and a strange mixture of gratitude. Could it be fellow Taoist Han was the one who killed him? "Your abilities truly run deep. I will remember this favor and repay it in the future." He tried to stand and even swallowed a medicine pill from his own pouch. But halfway up, all strength left his legs and he collapsed again. Panicked, he stared at his trembling limbs. "What is this? Why can I not use my strength? You speak of rewarding me, yet you seem unaware of your true situation." Han Li showed no intention of helping him. His tone was flat, even cold. Alarmed, Feng Yue sharply asked, "What do you mean? Has something happened to me? Did you place a restriction on me?" Han Li smirked. "You think too highly of me. If I wished to restrain you, I would not need such measures. Look for yourself." He flicked a small mirror toward Feng Yue. Confused but desperate, Feng Yue lifted it. The moment he saw his reflection, he gasped in terror. His face was pitch black in several places. His lips darkened, his entire complexion poisoned beyond recognition. He shouted in disbelief, then frantically summoned dozens of bottles from his storage pouch. In blind fear, he began swallowing pills one after another, heedless of the consequences. Han Li merely watched him without sympathy. Feng Yue soon sat cross-legged and tried to channel all the medicinal power. But after a long, futile struggle, his eyes opened in dread. How can this be? None of these antidotes work. What kind of poison is this? Han Li answered as though commenting on whether, although I have never seen it personally, it appears to be the agony poison of the 10 absolute poisons. The color drained completely from Feng Yue's already darkened face. Agony poison? They actually used that on me? That traitor must have relied on the Feng Clan. There were rumors they possessed such poison. The Feng Clan? Han Li's brows lifted slightly. But before he could ask, Feng Yue spoke again, trembling with realization. Wait, if it was agony poison, I should have died instantly. How am I still alive? Han Li's expression darkened. It seems you know nothing of the mercy you were shown. If I did not have questions for you, I would never have wasted a vast essence pill on you. And you only managed to cling to life earlier because of the thing on your neck temporarily blocking the poison. Without it, you would have perished instantly. And no miraculous medicine could have awakened you. Feng Yue instinctively grabbed the silver key hanging from his chest. His eyes filled with alarm. But after confirming it was still there, he exhaled shakily. I wondered how a Foundation establishment cultivator could resist agony poison for so long. Han Li continued, naturally, I investigated, but understand this clearly. The vast essence pill is not dissolving the poison. It is merely holding it back for a short time. Once its power fades, the poison will attack your heart again, and there will be no saving you. Feng Yue's face twisted with fear. The vast essence pill, if I had another one, could I suppress the poison for longer? Han Li's tone grew cold. It would keep you alive temporarily. Yes, but do you understand its value? The materials that create it are meant to help core formation cultivators break bottlenecks. It cannot be bought in a market, nor is it something you stumble upon twice. Feng Yue was stunned. A cultivation breakthrough pill. But before despair fully settled in, Han Li spoke again. There is, however, one method left for you to survive. Feng Yue's eyes lit with frantic hope. What is it? As long as you save me, I will agree to any condition. Han Li chuckled lightly. I want no reward, only answers to a few questions. The method itself is simple. Since the agony poison has completely destroyed your body's foundation, the only way out is to abandon this body altogether. Cultivators afflicted with the 10 absolute poisons have survived before, by using possession. Possession? Feng Yue murmured bitterly, surprising Han Li. Han Li raised his brow. What, do you find this method unacceptable? After a long moment, Feng Yue forced out a wry smile. I will not hide it from you. I already used possession once. This is not my original body. Han Li sighed with resignation. In that case, your path ends here. No one survives the 10 absolute poisons twice. Feng Yue's fear returned tenfold. There truly is no other way? Brother Han, you possess such knowledge, please consider again. There is nothing to reconsider. Han Li replied firmly. The 10 absolute poisons gained their reputation precisely because they have no cure. Feng Yue's lips trembled. Then, I am truly going to die soon? That is correct. Even if you consumed vast essence pills endlessly, you would eventually become resistant, and the poison would claim you regardless. In a final desperate grasp for life, Feng Yue stared at him intensely. How many vast essence pills does Brother Han possess? I wish to buy them all. Han Li frowned slightly but remained calm. Willing to buy them, are you? I am willing to sell. But I do not have many. Answer my questions first, and then we will discuss further. Ask whatever you want, Feng Yue said, utterly defeated. There is nothing I will not answer. Han Li nodded. Very good. First, your identity. You are not from the soaring tribes. You are from a noble family of the Great Jin. Correct? Feng Yue hesitated, then glanced at the jade pendant on the ground and the silver key on his chest. Finally, he gritted his teeth. Since you have already guessed it, was there any need to ask? Han Li gave a faint, calm smile. Which Ning is the Feng of Ning from? And how powerful is the Feng Clan? What other Ning is there? It is the Guan Ning Prefecture's Feng Clan, of course. It can be considered a significant faction. Feng Yue answered. Han Li listened quietly, his expression calm but his eyes sharp with calculation. Feng Yue seemed confused by the line of questioning. Yet Han Li showed no reaction beyond a thoughtful narrowing of his gaze. He asked whether Feng Yue meant the capital of the province, prompting the youth to clarify that there were several places named Guan Ning. But only the one in Liao province housed the Feng Clan of Ning. Han Li accepted the explanation without pressing further about the clan itself. Instead, he shifted the conversation toward the jade pendant lying on the ground. He gestured toward it and asked how Feng Yue had come to possess such an item. And more importantly, what its origins were. Feng Yue answered at once. The pendant came from his father and served as a symbol of status within the Feng clan. Han Li raised a doubtful brow and observed that it was quite unusual for a mere clan token to be a top-grade magic tool. Feng Yue shook his head, explaining that only 4 of these pendants existed within the entire Feng clan. They were meant for the clan's most important descendants. From that, Han Li concluded that Feng Yue's standing must have been quite high. The young man confirmed it grimly. He was the eldest son of the Feng clan and would have become clan head within several decades, if calamity had not struck. Han Li showed no surprise. Instead, he steered the conversation towards something far more pertinent, the connection between the Feng clan and the Buddhist sects of the Great Jin. He noted that the pendant held a deep Buddhist spiritual radiance, and he warned Feng Yue not to pretend ignorance. Feng Yue hesitated only briefly before revealing the truth. One of his ancestors had once been a lay disciple of Guan Ning's Thousand Light Temple, which itself was a branch of the illustrious gold-sifting sect, one of the 4 great powers of the Great Jin. He explained that the Feng clan had originally cultivated Buddhist methods, but after the Thousand Light Temple relocated away from Liao province several centuries earlier, the clan gradually shifted to a Confucian cultivation art instead. This revelation stirred Han Li's heart. Although he did not recognize the Thousand Light Temple by name, the gold-sifting sect was well known to him. This meant the Feng clan's Buddhist techniques were authentic and potentially valuable. Han Li asked whether Feng Yue knew any of these techniques himself. Feng Yue admitted he had personally avoided cultivating Buddhist methods, finding them far too slow, but he confirmed that the clan still preserved several manuals. At that moment, the voice of Monarch Soul Divergence echoed within Han Li's mind, advising him to ask about a specific matter, whether Feng Yue's ancestor had refined a crystal relic. Only such Buddhist cultivators were able to practice the rare art capable of dissolving baleful energy. Han Li immediately followed the advice. Feng Yue frowned thoughtfully, then confirmed that his ancestor had indeed cultivated a crystal relic. However, the ancestor's aptitude had been mediocre, and he never broke through the barrier to the nascent soul stage. Disheartened, he left the Thousand Light Temple, founded the Feng Clan of Ning, and passed down its legacy. The answer delighted Han Li. If the Feng Clan retained even a trace of that ancient heritage, it meant he had a real chance of obtaining a technique capable of dissolving the destructive baleful energy within his body. Such an opportunity was far better than searching endlessly across the Great Jin. With renewed calm, Han Li told Feng Yue he had one final question. Feng Yue braced himself and asked Han Li to continue. Han Li then questioned why the Agony poison, a poison so deadly that even core formation cultivators feared it, had been used on a mere foundation establishment cultivator like Feng Yue. Such precious poison was far too valuable to waste unless the attackers intended to kill immediately rather than capture alive. Feng Yue's face darkened, and he explained everything in a bitter tone. Feng Zhen, the traitor Han Li had already slain, had once been a rogue devil Dao cultivator hunted by enemies. Seeking refuge, he had joined the Feng clan and even accepted their surname. Feng Yue's grandfather had taken him in as a gesture of mercy. Later, Feng Zhen was sent to maintain relations with the soaring tribes. Feng Yue had come to the plains seeking him, But he did not expect the man to have been compromised by the Feng Clan. Because Feng Yue, as a direct descendant, could restrain Feng Zhen's magic power once he reached Foundation establishment, Feng Zhen had no choice but to rely on poison. The Feng Clan had supplied the Agony poison, and Feng Zhen used it to launch a sudden, lethal ambush. Han Li calmly repeated what he knew. Agony poison was colorless, scentless, and deadly upon first contact. Lesser cultivators fell instantly unconscious. It seemed clear to him that the Feng Clan were mortal enemies of the Feng Clan. Feng Yue confirmed it bitterly. The Feng, Zhang, Jin, and Feng clans were the four great noble clans of the Guanning prefecture, each maintaining a precarious balance. But when the Feng Clan weakened, the other three united and struck decisively, crippling the Feng Clan in a single sweeping blow. Now Feng Yue wandered among the tribes, the last direct descendant of a fallen clan. Poisoned and near death, his hatred for the Feng Clan burned deep within him. Han Li listened without comment. He declared that clan feuds were of no interest to him. What mattered was that Feng Yue had answered his questions satisfactorily. Then he returned to the true matter at hand, the vast essence pill. He stated that he possessed only about 10 pills, enough to extend Feng Yue's life by roughly 10 days, but each cost several thousand spirit stones. He asked whether Feng Yue could afford such a price. The young man's face twitched in shock. It was the cost of a top-grade magic tool. But after a moment of agonized hesitation, Feng Yue gritted his teeth and agreed to buy them. Han Li looked at him skeptically and asked whether he carried that many spirit stones. Feng Yue admitted he did not. Instead, he offered the silver key around his neck as collateral. With solemn seriousness, he explained that this key opened the Feng Clan's 1,000-year secret storage cave. The clan elders had entrusted the key to him during their final moments, instructing him to flee with it. The cave contained at least several tens of thousands of spirit stones, along with the preserved Buddhist techniques Han Li sought. Han Li gazed at the key without taking it, questioning how he could be sure the key was genuine or that the cave even existed. Feng Yue's expression turned bleak. He said he had no clan to return to, only scattered servants and branch relatives survived. If he died, the Feng Clan's final legacy would fall into the hands of the Feng Clan and be defiled. Leaving it to Han Li was infinitely preferable. After a long period of silent contemplation, Han Li agreed. The key could serve as collateral, but he required one assurance: a soul search. Han Li wished to experience a memory verification technique to confirm the cave's existence and the truth about the Buddhist techniques. Feng Yue paled. He feared soul searching deeply. But Han Li calmly explained that the method he intended to use was not the dangerous, invasive soul search employed by nascent soul cultivators. It was a cooperative technique. As long as Feng Yue assisted, he would only verify truth or falsehood, without probing any deeper. Seeing his poisonous wounds, hearing the slight cold edge in Han Li's voice, Feng Yue knew he had no real choice. He clenched his fists, took a slow, deliberate breath, and forced himself to decide. Feng Yue tightly gripped his fists and took a deep breath before coming to a decision. Fine, I will coordinate the technique with you. However, you may only search for matters relating to the Buddhist techniques and the secret storage. I will not let you look through anything else. In this episode, we saw Han Li uncover the truth behind Feng Yue's origins, the downfall of the once powerful Feng Clan, and the deep ties they once held with an ancient Buddhist lineage capable of cultivating rare relics. Across these 5 episodes, the story revealed how betrayal, poisoned schemes, and the ambitions of rival clans pushed Feng Yue to the brink of death. At the same time, Han Li discovered that the Feng Clan's hidden legacy might hold the very method he needs to dissolve the dangerous baleful energy threatening his own life. With the key to the clan's secret storage and the promise of Buddhist techniques now within reach, both men stand at a turning point that could reshape their futures. What happens next? Stay tuned for the next episode of A Mortal's Journey to Immortality. If you enjoyed this episode or found it intriguing, do not forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel to receive the latest updates on Han Li's journey. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next episode.